Hello and welcome to Find Your Freedom, a podcast dedicated to helping you truly find freedom in all aspects of life. Join your hosts and their expert guests as they share practical tips and strategies for finding more freedom in your life. It's time to take control of your life and create the future you want. Let's find your freedom. Here are your hosts, Lenny the Boss and Omid Rad Investor.
Hey, listen here. We're back again at Find Your Freedom. And right now, we have an amazing guest. And I'm super excited because I personally met this guy a few years ago and I thought I knew him. You know what I mean? Until you start to sit there and you start to dig, and to the point where I have to sit here and write a list. So for anyone that's watching this, I got a list of things. So we got a ton to unpack here. But let me tell you, just a little background on this guy. You know, he's a podcast host. All right, we're going to get into that. He's a business growth strategist. We're going to totally get into that. Entrepreneur, of course, best-selling author in all the books he's dropping this year. You're going to be absolutely amazed by that. Motivational speaker, family man. This dude is a world traveler everywhere on social media. He's just somewhere. I'm trying to keep up myself, you know, in one of the biggest foodies I know. And also, he is, I grant him right now, the King Networker. And in all due respect, I got to call you Mr. Grant. Mr. Grant, how are you doing today, man?
So every time I hear Mr. Grant, I think about my father. But, you know, for today's show, I'll go ahead and go with that. But, yeah, I'm doing well, man. I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to this opportunity. And like you said, we've known each other for a period of time. So to see you become a podcaster is a hell of a thing, a hell of an opportunity for me to be here right now.
Fantastic. So, you know, one of the things we just want to do before we, you know, start unpacking all this fantasticness that you got going on there, bundle up, you know, can you give the listeners just a brief, you know, 1-2 minute intro of who you are?
Wow, man. I always start off with saying that, you know, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I found creativity through graphic design, more so through graffiti, running and dodging from cops. My parents kidnapped me and dragged me kicking and screaming down to Atlanta, Georgia. They said the only thing that was logical at that time, throw his ass into art school. So then I got my graphic design degree, and then shortly thereafter that, I was like, there's got to be other opportunities besides graphic design, and that's when I really started becoming an entrepreneur, and I went on this journey to kind of figure things out for a period of time and got that degree, and I was like, there's got to be other things. So then I got my web design and multimedia degree, and I was like, well, that's cool. There's got to be other things. And at the same time, I went through a custody battle, a divorce, got primary for custody of my son, and a friend of mine was like, dude, it's time for you to pretty much become a full-time entrepreneur. You've been doing it part-time long enough. So I went ahead and made it work and hustled, and then I got an opportunity to kind of seize intellectual information, and I started collecting data. I started working for multiple different corporations for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and just learning their systems, quitting and going to get another job, learn their systems, quit, get another job. So I collected data from everywhere from Comcast to AT&T to Apple, and I was like, cool, now I have what I want. And then unfortunately, 2018, I had a stroke because I worked myself to death. So, and then, you know, I woke up in the hospital and it was like, kind of like, what am I going to do? And my girlfriend at the time was my wife now, was like, okay, now is opportunity for you to brand yourself the way you've been branding everyone else for the past 18 years. What are you going to do with that? So my next step was naturally become a YouTuber or a podcaster. I chose the latter because I was always a guy behind the curtain, became a podcaster, and then everything just started making sense. And I was like an idiot for not realizing that that was the missing element my entire time, was the media outlet.
Wow, like that's pretty amazing. I mean, I think a lot of people, they get into just getting jobs, and they transition into like you said, like other jobs, and then they just kind of go through this rabbit hole of like building different experiences. And how did you even decide, okay, I'm going to do this for myself? Because, you know, a lot of people are scared to do that, take that big step. So what would you say to a listener like that, you know, proceeding forward or making that, you know, that journey?
So I'll tell you like exactly the way I did it. And I'm a strategist by nature. So, you know what I'm saying? I always say I'm equally creative and equally analytical. Like a chessboard to me is a canvas. So what I did was I was working for a corporation at the time for like maybe 3 or 4 years. And I was also like moonlighting with a company out of Virginia doing political campaigns as mainly like their webmaster. And so I was like, okay, it's an opportunity for me. I got priority custody of my son now, opportunity for me to leave. How am I going to do that? So I went back into my database, and I was working at Home Depot at one time, and I knew Home Depot's colors. I knew their CNYK breakdown. I knew everything about Home Depot possible because I worked on the ad spectrum of Home Depot. So I went into Home Depot, got a job like I've done many times before, got that piece of paper, and I took that piece of paper and I went to the company in Virginia and was like, look, Home Depot just hired me full time. I'm not going to be able to work with you no more. Here's an opportunity for you to either hire me full time or work with me more of a B2B play and give me a full-time contract. Took them like maybe 3 or 4 days. They made a decision and they brought me on essentially as a 1099. So that was essentially my first full-time client with benefits and everything. And I was making 6 figures at that opportunity. And then I was like, well, shit, since I'm pushing my luck, why don't I take the current client that I'm working with right now, my current employer, and convert them into an actual client? So when I went to my manager and I was like, look, I got full custody of my son. I'm about to leave. Let me buy all my hardware. Let me continue to work, but let me work from a B2B standpoint. And I was like, you take my last check and pay for all my equipment. So that's how I paid for like all my startup stuff. I bought my desk, I bought my computers from the company I was working for, and I took all that home. So at that point in time, I had 2 companies that were essentially paying me 6 figures both to kind of maintain and do what I was doing remotely anyway, now at a full-time capacity as a B2B standpoint.
Man, that's absolutely amazing. There's a few things that I want to unpack there because, one, I heard that you invested in yourself. You said, take the last paycheck and allow me to buy the tools that's required for me to sit here and become that person I know I need to become. But the one thing I really want to talk about just a little bit here is me personally. I worked for a company for over 22 years. I was the vice president of operations. I had big time roles, all these skills, but I never thought, my skills would transfer. I always thought that my skills just apply at the workplace. But I'm hearing that you went to this place, you gathered some information here. You went to this place, you gathered some information here. You worked at this place and gathered some information there. Like, what was it for you that allows you to know that these skills you're gathering is going to be transferable for you to do your own?
Because like I said, from a chess standpoint, I've always looked at the opportunity at scale, right? So I have my design degree. So technically speaking, I could design whatever I want, however I want, and at least I know how to talk that language. Then I got my web design multimedia degree. So I was like, now I know how to talk that language and I can build and develop. But what I was missing was more so the business. And I love school, but I was not willing to go back to school to pay a premium to learn information that was outdated. So I was like, well, who's the big players? Let me go after the big players, get the opportunities, and learn their systems. Like, for example, Comcast, for me, till this day, they are the biggest vendor for upsells and downsells completely. There's no one that can touch them because the second that you have 1 year up, you call them and they send you to another department. Those 3 departments are all in one building. They're just cycling through the ecosystem, and every time they're just increasing it by 10%. So 5, 10, 6, 20 years go by, you can't lose them. They're always going to be in front of you. So I was like, okay, that's a hell of an upsell model. Great. Now I understand that. What else do I need? So then I became an insurance agent, right? And I was like wanting to understand more money management. Then I got my Series 6, and I was literally diving into these different principles because I need to understand money. I need to understand business. I need to understand marketing. And I was kind of like hoarding this information to become an empire, essentially.
So I think a lot of people will, they get this like shiny, object syndrome, and they're like, hey, there's, new item or new thing that we want to participate in. How did you decide on like what skills you wanted to develop? And then at what point do you outsource some of that out? Because it looks like you're like a jack of all trades. You do like, you find something that maybe there's a deficiency and you learn it, and then you do it well, and then you move on to the next thing. But for somebody who wants to scale, or at what point do you decide it's the right time to scale and leverage other people?
So I would say the right type of skills before you have a damn stroke. All right. So like literally when I was at the hospital, it was kind of like, well, damn, I think I overworked the capabilities of the human body and the human mind. I pushed myself to the brink of extinction. So that when I kind of like came back like a phoenix, that was the strategy moving forward. How do I take my information and delegate that information to other people? So like right now I have a staff of about 15 And I call them VAs because, again, like that's the signature keyword. But obviously they have different disciplines. Some of them are graphic designers, some of them are multimedia experts, some of them are app developers. But when I'm talking to clients, I just say that we have a general VA service that we can get X, Y, and Z done, to your point, because when people come to me, they see me as the jack of all trades. It's like the hardest thing to give me a referral unless you have a one-on-one conversation. And then that conversation is going to be based upon what your needs and requirements are. And then in my database, that I'm going to talk to that language, talk to that product, talk to that service, and I'm not going to upsell anything else at that point.
Okay, that's great. And for the listeners, like, it's very important that you heard what he said. He said, "Hey, I worked myself into bad health, and that was the awakening to now start to delegate and outsource all of this work." So very important, listeners, that you take that in. Now you just mentioned that you have a staff of 15, which man, that's super fantastic. So I guess two questions here. One, give us like a one sentence clear definition of, what you do, like what's your sales pitch to these companies? And then two, the mindset of dealing with 15 people, I mean, that's a lot of folks, so how do you do that?
So the first part, I kind of put myself under the umbrella because, again, if I say graphic design, that person is only going to see me as that, right? And they're not going to see anything else. So I can't limit myself to that whole. If I say web design, web development, it's the same exact principle. So being that I'm a jack of all trades, I had to kind of pull out of it and think more executive level. So when I come into the equation, I more so state that I'm a brand and growth strategist. And 9 out of 10 times, most people don't even understand the definition of either one of those. So then it gives me opportunity to kind of define what those are. Yes, a logo is part of a brand, but if you think about a brand, I always define them as 3 separate sectors. There's a company brand, there's a personal brand, there's a product brand, and there's a service brand. And once they understand it, like now they understand that I understand business, and then I look at scaling. Like, so what's your business model looking like? What's your value proposition? What's your unfair advantage? Who's your customer segments? Where's your revenue stream? Now, all of these things are 100% related to graphic design, web design, video production, all of them. But most of those individuals and agencies, they come at it from that angle. I come at it from the big point. Okay, you want a website, but why do you want a website? What are you trying to execute with that website? And then I may find out that they really don't need a website. They just need a landing page. They may need a funnel. They may need a new product or PDF to create to then sell to get leads. So I'm more so digging deeper than just selling that actual service.
Man, wow. I love that. I think a lot of times people kind of pigeonhole themselves into like a particular role. And so then they limit the funnel of people kind of coming to them. And like, to me, it sounds like you're a problem solver. So essentially what you're doing is you're asking tons of questions. You've created a big, set of resources, and that's allowed you to essentially help other people with whatever it is within their line of business. So I know you talk about value proposition, so maybe you can kind of share like your value proposition. Like, there's a client out there, maybe you can share, what that would be for somebody who has never met you or doesn't know you.
I think my value proposition stems from like my podcast, and I've had this question asked at the end of my podcast from time to time. And I always say is that I'm building long-term legacy, not only for my children, but for the person I'm interviewing or the client I'm talking to, for their children and their grandchildren, which is completely different than saying make money. I mean, that comes with making money. That comes with other business units. But I want you to think about, okay, are you planning on selling this company one time? What are you planning on doing when you die with the company? Who's going to run the company? So again, growth strategy kind of dives into that. What are your systems behind the scenes to maintain that company once you decide to sell it, or if you're dead and gone? Because everything that I'm doing, I'm stacking it up to where once I pass away, again, I've had the experience of almost dying. So every single day, that's why I turn and burn so much content, because I'm building that content repeatedly. So that way, once I'm dead, it'll be like I'm still alive. Content will still be coming out years after I pass away.
Dude, that is freaking amazing, and that's what life's about, right? Like, you have your life experience that you say, hey, I came to a point where I almost died, and what would I have left my family? So now everybody got that problem, and you have all these individuals who are super smart. They can sit here and build a brand, build a business, and grow it. But, you know, thinking about, hey, if I happen to not be here tomorrow, what happened? Right. And that's a problem to solve. So, salute to that, man. But, you touched on your podcast, right? And your podcast, which have to say you're a brother of mine, you're a boss, right? So I definitely have to throw that out there, right? So you got a boss uncaged. Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, literally, like when I was at the hospital and my girlfriend at the time was my wife right now, looked at me and she was like, it's time for you to brand yourself the way you've been branding everyone else. So I went through that philosophy of what branding really means. It's like I still own my original company, which is the agency, but there was issues with naming that company. It's issues with spelling the name of that company. So I went back to the drawing board and I was like, what's something that a 5-year-old can spell? What's something that collectively both letters together are no longer than a phone number? What's something that when somebody looks at it, they already know those first 4 letters, which is boss. It's already self-defined, and then the uncaged. So the meaning of that is essentially if you're an individual, if you're working for a boss right now and you're trying to become an entrepreneur on your own, like that's who we're talking to. And then in addition to that, if you're a boss and you have a company, but you want to scale, you want to grow, you want to encage like your capital, you want to encage your revenue. So all these things were encompassing as far as the brand was. And then I took that and I just kept building and building on top of that.
Man, I love that. Like I'm reading this, right? Become uncaged, trailblazer, unconventional thinker, trendsetter, tycoon. Like that really resonates with me. Like when I was reading that, I was like, okay, I'm listening. I'm subscribing. I'm going to hit that button. Because I think so many people want to do those sort of things. And I just love like the words that you use. And I think they're very powerful. I guess like for like your typical listener, what are they looking for as they're listening to these stories and what sort of feedback have you gotten from listeners from what you've done?
I would think my listeners are the people that I'm interviewing on the show, and I like that as a niche because the thing that I always hear, maybe probably after season 2, season 3, season 4, consistently from everyone, or at least 5 out of 7 people that I've interviewed, is that interview was different. Is that I've done my due diligence. I've done research behind the scenes. I may ask someone about their vacation in Hawaii from 10 years ago. I may ask them about, like, I know you have this dog. Like, those are the things that you usually don't get as this podcast, but I'm essentially building a partnership and a relationship, and I'm telling their story. And I always say I'm telling the stories in waves. If I talk 100% about business, some of my audience is going to check out because it's just too much about a topic that they may not be relatable to. But if I talk about their family, talk about their kids, what do they do on vacation, and then flip that back into their business and consistently keep juggling that conversation, I can keep everyone that's listening very in tune for an hour, and that's our average episode.
All right. So how do we hire you for this strategic service that you're subscribed to? Hopefully, we get the family discounts or having, as a friend, on the show. But, it's amazing because, a few minutes ago, we talked about the first business that you created. Now you have this podcast, a successful one, well over 160 episodes published, right? Like tell us, was there any principles that was different with growing the first business and growing your podcast business?
Yes and no. I mean, all the principles that I learned and that I would say I stole from the other companies that I work for, the missing thing that I was missing with that first company was delegation and systematizing, automation. Those are like the key terminologies. And again, I understood those things, and it was always, I'm going to get to it. Let me just learn this and I'll get to it. Let me learn this and I'll get to it. But with Boss and Case, I was like, look, I think I can continue to learn, but let me start executing what I've always known how to do, but I wasn't really doing for myself. So I started outsourcing. I started pulling in people and training them. And the other thing about that is, like, when you find someone, you may find them for reason X, but you really have to dive in and ask them what they really want to do. And that's when I found out that I may hire someone to do one administrative thing, but they may have a degree in like copy editing. They may have a degree in audio engineering. Well, why the hell would I not use them for what they want to do versus for what I hired them for? So I would upgrade them and move them. And then the other thing too, with your question you asked earlier about managing 15 people, it's essentially easy when I have two main people that I communicate with and then they delegate. So I don't really deal with all 15. I just deal with the two core people. They understand my philosophies. They understand everything that I need them to do. And then they'll delegate. And then I get to do what I need to do, which like I'm doing right now, this podcast, or working on the notebooks that I'm releasing this month as well.
So I love that. I think it sounds like you've incorporated like some sort of COO where, they kind of know your philosophy. They take care of everything for you, and then you take care of like the higher level items. Maybe you can walk me through like some of those projects as far as like the books and like what's the inspiration behind them and like what's like coming up like in the pipeline.
Yeah. So last year I took the year off because I was really harnessing the systems of building podcasting. And the year before, total I've produced 8 books. And so now I was like, obviously going through the Kindle cash flow with your cousin and understanding how he does things systematized, I took that system and applied it to my other systems. So now at scale, prime example, from the 2nd of January until the 3rd of February, I'm going to be able to create and execute, which I've already done technically, but I'm releasing them one day at a time, 32 notebooks. These 32 notebooks are essentially a system that helps with indexing and categorizing different categories of information. That's the downfall to note-taking, is that when somebody takes notes, they always have to figure out what page it is. Wouldn't it be easy to go in the front of the book and say that this word is real estate is on page 58 and have it color-coded and then go to page 58 and then have all your notes on that particular topic? So I made an entire series of notebooks on that, and then they're partnered with journals. And the journals takes it even deeper. So the first journal I created was a Uncaged Book Club journal, which stemmed from the podcast. And that journal essentially allows you to document 90 books in one journal. And that's another thing that I was problem solving. I was like, if I go traveling, which I do pretty often, it's easy for me to listen to audiobook, but it's hard for me to manage the notes, or it's hard for me to carry 90 books with me. What would it look like for me to condense 90 books into one journal? So that's when I made that opportunity. And then I mix it with the indexing and cataloging system all together. So you have the notebooks, 32 that are coming out now. The journals are then going to come out the month after that. And then later on this year, my goal is to produce another 8 books. One is going to be on podcasting, volumes, maybe 2 or 3 of those. Another one on branding. And then the other thing that I figured out with AI technology and art was like, well, now it's time for me to start creating my children's books. How do I then teach kids about podcasting through art that's created through digital AI, and then pull in the podcast information that I know so well and put it into a series, and that's a 12-part series as well.
Man, dude, see, this is what I'm talking about. Tupac, you just throwing the whole, bookcase at me, man. I had the duck over here, but listen, look, you just mentioned I got to rebirth this because I'm not sure if this went over anybody, right? You said you about to drop, like albums, dude, like 32, you like the Stevie Wonder right now, the workbooks. I dropped 32 workbooks. Then, you coolly, calmly say, yeah, I'm going to throw another 8 books in there. Some this to that. I mean, like, how are you even running, one business that is helping other businesses succeed, or putting in plans, if someone happened to walk away from that business? Then you have a very successful podcast business, and now you're dropping 32 books plus an additional 8. That's over 40, books. Like, how are you doing all this?
And segmentation and scaling, man. So like last year, I didn't have opportunity to produce any books. So for me, it was kind of like, I felt like I fell backwards a little bit. So I was like trying to catch back up. But what I did do really well in the past 2 years with my podcast is that I've recorded enough content to where right now we're on season 5, but we have enough episodes to get us to season 8. So we have a backlog of about 130 episodes. So if we record an episode today, technically speaking, that episode would not air for another 12 to 18 months. So that gave me the room to say, okay, well, the podcast is on autopilot. I got a year of time that I can focus on books. I'm gonna do what I did with the podcast with books. So then next year, It's my next step. What am I going to do next year? I'm going to keep the podcast going. The books are going to be in alignment. It's going to be 40-something books at that point. So now I can focus on my next thing. And I'm going to spend the entire year, essentially what I want to do is start working on software to pull everything that I'm doing into one system. But I need to get all the backlog of things that I have in my brain off my plate. So I'm taking them a month at a time, a year at a time. And then once I have that highway of freedom, it's going to be game on.
Wow. I mean,
Man,
I'm kind of speechless right now, so I think just for the average person, if they even get one book, that would be a great accomplishment. So if somebody even wants to get started, let's say that, you've inspired them, they hear your story, they want to kind of systemize like their business, they want to free up a little bit of time, and then they want to then, put it on paper. What is the best way to do that? Once, and get like their first book started.
I always say, there's so many different disciplines out there. Prime example with you guys. You guys are interviewing individuals. So if you're familiar with the podcasting format of like Tools of the Titan, right? That book is essentially taking the best of a podcast, taking that information. Every single person interviewed becomes a chapter. You interview 12 people, 12 chapters. That book is done, right? You're transcribing your audio and your podcast is feeding into that. And then you have volume 1, volume 2, as long as you have a podcast. That's one book. If you're more of a stage talker, if you're talking about like a particular discipline, let's say I'm talking about email marketing, for example, well, that's easy, right? You can kind of spit off the top of your head the 10 key things that you need to know about email marketing. That's the low-hanging fruit. But then you can take each one of those and really flush them out and give people step-by-steps things to look for. And by default, you're just recording audio, or you're just transcribing, or you're just writing down notes, and you're flooding out a layout. So you start off with that outline, and then you do day by day. If you start with a 10 bullet outline and you do 10 days, you got a book, like literally in 2 weeks. Now you have to edit it, you have to clean it up, you have to design all that. But the content of that book, if you're teaching and talking and you're talking on stages, it should be really easy for you to regurgitate that content in less than no time to get you your first primary book.
Mr. Grant, excuse me, but where's the course? Listen, I'm Jack. Amina and I, we're gonna be the what you call them, the beta testers, the test guys for this. So, because it actually, listen, I wrote one book, right? Ebook. I give it away, for free, and I thought that I was doing something. I was like, yeah, I'm telling my family, my wife, we all forwarding it, and I run into Mr. Grant, and I'm just like, I think I need to go back and step it up just a little bit. But
that's what's you're in the circle, man. Like being associated to your cousin Ty Cohen, that was one of my missing links. It was kind of like I was writing books before him, but once I realized that it was a system to writing books, I was like, holy, like that changed everything for me. Because before I was writing books like everyone else, taking 6 months, 9 months, and then once I figured out a system and I added all my other systems to it, it was like, well, I could write a book every day if I want to, but again, I have other things going on. But once you understand those disciplines of the system, it makes writing a book like next to nothing.
Hey, that's fantastic. You're absolutely right. System is everything. Systems is what move you along. It also buy back a lot of your time, right? But hey, listen, one of the things that I follow you on social media, of course, and one of the things that I see all the time that, dude, like you're everywhere. Like you're just world traveler, man, and you love food. So tell us about some places you've been to. Tell us about that Uncaged Foodie that you got going.
Yeah, for some people that are not foodies, they don't understand like my why I'm building that out. So it's kind of like it's a signature to where I can start talking to business owners in that area of expertise. So like podcasts can go hand in hand with restaurants, right? Books can go hand in hand with recipe books for restaurants. Scaling goes hand in hand with restaurants. So I'm targeting that community by building that community, if that makes sense. So ideally, once I started traveling pretty frequently, I was just kind of like, well, I missed so many opportunities in my younger days when I was traveling. I was like, well, now when I travel with intent. Yes, it's family time, but how do I then take family time and then put that into production? So food tours. So I started doing these food tours, and I started realizing as a traveling person, the food tour should be the first thing that you should do when you travel to any new state, country, period, because not only are you getting delegated by a local, you're tasting cuisine, but they're also showing you around the town. All people that travel, they want to be with the locals, but they don't know where to go. Pay less than $100, you know exactly where to go, what time, and where everything is at. And then you also have this aspect of capturing that content. So the food group just made perfect sense. So I think some of the best places I've been so far as cuisine was definitely Shanghai, China, Spain. Spain was just, I think right now it's me and my wife, we were like literally waiting for our kids to get out of college, because we're like we would move. Out of all the places we've ever been to, Spain is the place that I would pick up and move to tomorrow without thinking twice about it.
Man, you're speaking my language. So when it comes to foodie, and I'm writing this down because, I travel for, different real estate events and I love food, but, I never really capture those moments. It just, I'm Googling, I'm Yelping, I'm trying to find, places to go locally. And one, I don't maybe maximize the opportunity when I'm out there. And two, just like, I think having some sort of local person, like you said, that's the best, because if you have somebody local, they'll show you around, all the little hot spots. Because even in Yelp, sometimes within some of those websites, it's hit or miss. So, but having somebody local that helps you, and even just like, I think traveling in general is just like so underappreciated, and people need to do it more often. So it just you creating that community, I think it gets people to want to do that. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. I mean, like recently we had an opportunity to go to New York and we did a food tour. I'm from New York, but even from New York, and gave me an opportunity to do like Chinatown and Little Italy. And we did it on Chinese New Year. So we did the tour, but we're walking amongst the parade and the crowd, and you seeing the dragons, and you see, and it's like hundreds of thousands of people walking through the streets, and we're in the middle of a food tour at the same time. Like, you cannot make that up. That's a life experience that, for me, was like a once in a lifetime thing. Like, it's an opportunity that if it's there, why would you not capitalize on it?
Look, they call me the skinny fat guy, and the reason why they call me that is because I love to eat. Now, one of the things that I want to do is I want to be a food critic. I want to be a critical of cheesecake, right? But I want the whole. Now, I got all these videos in my phone. I don't release them. Maybe, now after this show, Mr. Grant's going to get on my ass to allow me to release in the Uncaged Foodie group, but I just think that's absolutely amazing. Just the life that you're living, the life that you set up for yourself, the understanding that you can take bits and pieces of all these places that you work and create, use that experience to create a life that's just amazing. Like, the only thing that holds me back is your kids from moving to a totally different country. I guess, just tell us a little bit about just being a family. What is it like being a family?
I would say, I mean, I love it through and through. Like I said, I had an opportunity, which most males don't have opportunity to, essentially, when they go through a divorce, to raise their son. So I had primary full custody of my son since he was 4 years old, and now he's 16 going on 17. So for that decade time, it was just pretty much him and I, 75% of the time, just him and I all the time. So when I was going to speak or going to conventions, I always had opportunities to drag him along with me no matter where I was going, and coach the football team and coach the basketball team. And, I even got to the point where I was the PTA president one time. I was also in Boy Scouts as well, too, in the early days. So now that he's older, he's a teenager, it's a little bit more difficult. And my daughter, she's like 17. So it's like, they see us grinding, they see what we're doing, and I've been in enough relationships in my life to realize that they're going through that fog right now. But once they hit 20-something years old and they look back, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now relentlessly. I'm doing it day in, day out, and I tell them all the time, and I talk shit with them. Like, I know you haven't listened to my podcast yet, but one day, if you don't listen to it, I guarantee your kids or your great-grandkids will listen to it, because now they have opportunity to know who their grandfather was or who their great-grandfather was, and it's not a lost opportunity. I'm creating enough content so they could piece those puzzles together to know me indirectly and see themselves in me and utilize this content that I'm creating to help them flourish 50, 100 years from now without me even being there with them.
I love that. I mean, I think about legacy and how do you create a legacy? And it's even like having some sort of library where people can reference, and that's generation after generation, and it builds a certain mindset where then people adopt it, and it's friends and family and everybody around you. And, it's, people use like influencer very like loosely, but I think it's like your ability to impact others in such a great manner. And I think that creates, different trajectories for people. So that's amazing. And, I think for me, like, I'm going to keep talking about this. Like, I just feel like we have to have you on like multiple times. And, but I know we're getting close to the end of the show, and maybe you can kind of share with us how do you define finding your freedom?
I think it kind of stems off of what I said before. Like, yes, you could travel. Yes, you could make money. You could do all these different things. But I think real freedom comes into like a genome, right? It's kind of like over a period of time. Like if you look at the Rockefellers, if you look at the Waltons, I look at that as real freedom. Because again, yes, you may end up creating some like spoiled monsters in the process, but if you leave behind your principles and leave behind your voices, then you're giving not only your personal freedom now, but you're giving the opportunity for the legacy on to be free as well. Versus if I could become rich tomorrow, right? Let's say if I'm worth $100 million and I don't do anything with it, I don't influence or I don't give back and I don't educate, then what am I really doing all that for? I can't take the money with me after life. I have to build and establish a tower that where it'll shadow any negative things that may come into these kids' lives down the road. And it's maybe somebody that may hear this podcast that's not even born yet. And what we're talking about right now may influence them to be like, wow, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to influence my kids the same way he's talking about it. And then we're leaving them those breadcrumbs to follow.
My God, dude. Let's make sure that we, mark it up 2-3 times slot for Mr. Grant. Whatever Mr. Grant wants, time slide, whatever he needs, let's just throw him in because, this was absolutely, made a dude, I love you, dude. Like this is crazy. But hey, for the listeners, where can they find you? Like, if you like the most interesting dude that I know, like, so throw it out there. How can people get in contact?
I mean, finally, I'm at that point now when I have that question, I could simply say, if you go to Google and you type in Boss Uncaged, we dominate the first 10 pages of Boss, like literally. So whether you're looking for merch, we're on there. Whether you're looking for the podcast, whether you're looking for S.A Grant, like literally just Google Boss Uncaged, or you can go to bossuncaged.com. I mean, it's literally that simple.
Fantastic. So we're coming to the end of the show, and one of the things we do here is we don't have guests on our show. We have friends, right? And we like to just interrupt people right now. So we got to bring this big bull, all right? It's kind of this thing where all three of us go in, we try to blow speakers, we try to, walk for eardrums, all that, right? So on a count of 3, right? Everybody get ready. I'm giving you a 2, 3, 4 seconds. On a count of 3, 1, 2, 3, we want to say boom collective. Got that? Ooh. All right, let's do it. All right. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Look, check this out. Once again, this is Find Your Freedom, and we are here with Mr. Grant, one of the most interesting individuals you will ever meet. He is an awesome guy. We didn't even get into the family part, which on part 2, we make sure that we do that, and then unfold some of the other things that he's also interested in. Just like he said, just go do a Google search. Believe me, his SEO is the bomb. You're going to see everything that's going to have to do with my man, Mr. Boss, Mr. Grant. But listen, we need your help, all right? If you like more episodes like today, we need you to listen. We need you to give an honest 5-star review. Also, write some comments there. Well, me and I, we get in there and make sure that we will address it. Also, make sure you share this with your friends. Make sure you share this with your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your aunt, your uncle, your cousin, and everybody. Because I'm going to tell you, today's episode, just like Mr. Grant said, regardless if you're young, old, or middle age, it applies to you. And with that being said, until the next episode, we talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to Find Your Freedom. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're at it, please help us spread the word by leaving a rating and review and sharing the podcast with friends, family, and colleagues. Until next time, get out there and find your freedom.